Welcome to Ohio Wild Outdoors. In this video we're going to be doing a product review of the SoloStove Titan. What I have here is the SoloStove Titan stove along with the pot that comes as part of the kit. And what we're going to do, we're going to light the stove, we're going to time it to see how long it takes to get the stove ready to cook. And then we're going to be doing just a basic water boil test, like what you would do at camp for making coffee or making soup, that kind of a thing. I have two 16.9 ounce bottles of water, so let's get into it. So here we have the SoloStove Titan and its 60 ounce cook pot. If we take a quick look inside here really quickly, there you should be able to see it's 60 ounces or 1.6 quarts. So it's fairly large, which is nice. It does take up a lot of space in your backpack, which is could be an issue for some. The stove and the cook pot together with a couple of extra accessories weighed out to just under 3 pounds. Those accessories, things that I carry with me while backpacking, is some already dry hardwood, some fire starter, and of course a striker. In my experience with the stove, it works the best with dry hardwood and a fire starter. It is a biofuel stove, so really anything that's flammable can be used. As a stove itself, it's supposed to be a wood gas stove where it burns smoke. Essentially, that's what the extra vents at the top are for. I will include in the video description a link to the SoloStove website that talks about the recirculating technology that they've built into the stove for you to review. But primarily what we're interested in is how the stove works, how quickly it cooks, that kind of thing. So let me get the camera moved around and we will get set up to start a fire in the stove. So I got a couple of pieces of wood down here. I've got a fire starter set up. I've got my watch so you can watch the time. I'm going to start with the fire starter and see how quickly we can get this thing to light and start burning. See if I can do this one-handed. All right, fire starter is lit. Let's get it in there. And then what we're going to do, we're going to stack a couple of pieces of wood around it just to get the fire going. I'm sure there's probably better techniques for this. This is a little bit difficult to try to do one-handed. But once the fire gets going, it does tend to burn fairly quickly. And the SoloStove itself includes a cutout here at the front so that once you have your cook pot installed, you can continue to feed pieces of wood in through the notch. Okay, current time is 13:47, not quite 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Stove is lit. You can see it's burning quite well right now. It is producing a little bit of smoke. That's not going to hinder what we're trying to do. So I'm going to go ahead and get the cook pot with some water in it, and we're going to get it set up on here and start getting a good time for how long it takes to boil about 17 ounces of water. Okay, so I've got 17 ounces of water in here. The stove is really starting to get going, which is good. A benefit again of using nice dry wood. You can see there was a cooking accident with the stove. That tends to happen when it gets too hot. But let's go ahead and get this thing put on here. And should point out that that's actually really hot. So let's get this thing put on here, and we'll start keeping track of how long it takes for it to start to boil. So you can see now, fire's really going. This thing gets quite hot. Now, one of the things I would recommend are a set of gloves. The stove itself does get very hot. It does also cause the wire handles up here to become quite warm. So that is what it is. You can see too that it's starting to, we're starting to get a little bit of creosote building up on the outside of the cook pot. It's already fairly blackened. I've spent a fair bit of time trying to scrub that off in the past. It seems to be a side effect of maybe getting a little bit too much wood in the pot. However, if you look, I don't know how close I want to get this. If you look in there, you can see where it's actually venting air from the bottom up through the holes in the middle, and it's burning smoke, which is what it's supposed to do. One thing that's a big problem with this stove that I ran into is it's really easy to overfill the fire chamber and choke off air circulation. And this stove, more than anything else, absolutely needs to have free-flowing air through it to work correctly. And if we look up here, we've got steam coming out. So we're already, let's take a look. Yep. Nice rolling boil, and here comes the rain. Hopefully this doesn't negatively impact what we're trying to do here too much. You can see that the fire is now burned out. If I look in there, I can see some hot coals, so really it just needs a little more wood and it would start burning again quite nicely. We got a fair bit of steam coming out of the pot. It was at a full rolling boil. Current time is 13:55, so basically 5 minutes to boil not quite 20 ounces of water. We're sitting on a little bit of an angle here, so that's not giving an accurate reading. That says 20 ounces, the bottle says 16.9. So basically 10 minutes under ideal conditions to get the fire lit, get some water boiled, and be able to actually use it. Now, of course, 5 minutes, that's not long enough for something longer. Obviously, you would want to keep feeding wood into the stove to keep the fire going longer. If it's extremely windy, or if you overfill the stove, it takes longer, it performs more slowly. So just some thoughts. But yeah, basically 10 minutes to from start to finish. Now, of course, because it is a wood stove, it had a fire in it. Now I have to wait for it to cool down. It's about 85 degrees out here today, so I expect that to take, unfortunately, quite a while. But you know, that's just kind of part of the deal. So we finished the demonstration and you know, showing how quickly the SoloStove, under realistically ideal conditions, how quickly it can work. Is about 10 minutes from the time I lit the fire starter to it having fully boiled and prepared 20 ounces of water. It's more like 17 ounces. But it was about 10 minutes. And again, that was under, you know, ideal conditions. I used a fire starter. I already had some dry hardwood to use. And one of the things that I would definitely want to re-emphasize is that airflow through the stove itself is absolutely critical. It is really easy to overfill the stove with stuff and it chokes off the airflow. In this video, I used a fire starter, but if you were in an environment or a survival type situation using the stove, you would definitely want to put your large dry pieces at the bottom. And again, that's primarily focusing around the idea that it needs airflow. So your fluffy tinder or kindling at the top, so that as that burns off, the ashes can settle down onto your larger fuel pieces. That's the way that I've had the best the best outcomes with the stove if I'm not using a fire starter. So there are some considerations to keep in mind with the stove. Right now it's about 85-90 degrees out here, and the stove is red hot. I bumped it a little bit with one of my fingers while I was moving something around, and I have a nice, I don't know if you can see this or not, I have a nice small burn on my finger. I mean, that happens, right? That's what happens when you play with fire. So, but anyway, it's a great stove for car camping. If you're into survival type stuff, it would be good for that. You know, its fuel availability makes it very versatile, but it's very heavy. So with that, thank you for watching the video, subscribe to the channel, and enjoy.